There is something women will never admit in public. Something so disturbing, so contradictory to the image they project, that if you revealed it at a family dinner, you would be socially crucified. But it is real, it is verifiable, and once you understand it, once you truly grasp the psychosexual duality of the female mind, you will never again believe a single word they say about what attracts them. Because what comes out of their mouths and what ignites in their imagination when the lights go out are two completely different universes. In that dark space, in that private theater of their most forbidden fantasies, women are not the pure and innocent creatures society pretends they are. They are wild, they are dark. They are, in one word, one that will offend them but is absolutely accurate: dirty. And before you start with the speech about respect, before you come with your manufactured morality, let me make something clear. I am not talking about disrespecting women. I am talking about respecting them enough to recognize that they are complex sexual beings with desires that society has forced underground. Desires they themselves sometimes feel ashamed of having. Desires that completely contradict the feminist narrative of what they are supposed to want. If you are brave enough and perceptive enough to understand those desires, you gain access to a level of power over the female psyche that most men don't even know exists. Let's start with the most obvious evidence, the one everyone ignores because it's too uncomfortable. Go to any bookstore, go to the romance section, a space overwhelmingly consumed by women. What do you find? 50 Shades of Grey. It sold over 150 million copies. 150 million, mostly bought by women who publicly preach about equality and respect. And what is that book about? It is a relationship where a dominant, controlling, obsessive, possessive man sexually subdues a virgin, naive woman. He turns her into his sexual toy. He ties her up. He controls her. He dominates her. And women devoured it. Not ironically, not as a guilty pleasure. They bought it. They read it in public on the subway. They discussed it in book clubs with their friends. But ask them directly, would you like a man to treat you like that in real life? And they'll look at you in horror. They'll call you a misogynist for even suggesting it, because they've been trained to deny what their biology is screaming. They've been programmed to say they want one thing, while their bodies, their fantasies, and their book purchases reveal they want something completely different. But it goes deeper than 50 Shades. There's an entire literary genre that has exploded in popularity over the last decade. It's called erotic monster romance. And yes, you read that correctly, erotic monster books, where female protagonists have explicit sexual encounters with non-human creatures, vampires, werewolves, demons, aliens, even tentacled monsters. We are not talking about a small, shameful niche hidden in the dark corners of the internet. We are talking about a genre with thousands of titles, millions of female readers, and authors making fortunes writing about women being sexually taken by beings that represent the complete opposite of the civilized, domesticated masculinity they're supposedly meant to want. Why? Why would a modern, educated woman with access to real men fantasize about being possessed by a monster? Because the monster represents what modern men have been castrated from expressing: raw power, unapologetic domination, undomesticated masculinity. The monster doesn't ask for permission. He doesn't check for verbal consent at every step. He doesn't worry about her feelings. He takes what he wants. And on the pages of those books, in the privacy of her imagination, she melts into that. She gets aroused by it. She fantasizes obsessively about it. But she will never admit it outside that safe space of anonymous fantasy. This is where Niccolò Machiavelli, that master of seeing behind social masks, has something brutal to teach you. Machiavelli wrote that people in general judge more with their eyes than with their hands, because everyone can see, but very few can truly feel. What that means is this: public appearance is a lie. What people say publicly, what they present to the world, is theater, a performance. The truth is found in what they do when they believe no one is watching. And women, when they believe no one is watching, when they are alone with their thoughts, their books, their pornography, reveal desires that would completely destroy their public image if they were ever exposed.
Let's talk about pornography, because here the evidence becomes impossible to deny. Data from the largest porn sites in the world shows something fascinating. Female consumption of pornography has exploded over the last decade. Women now represent nearly 1/3 of all porn traffic. But here's the interesting part. What are they searching for? The most popular categories among women are not what you would expect if you believe their public narrative. It's not soft romance with dim lighting. It's not tender lovemaking between loving couples. The dominant categories are BDSM, forced submission, violent sex, humiliation, gangbangs, and simulated non-consent scenarios. And before you rush to defend, before you say this is a lie, the data is public. Pornhub releases annual statistics. The numbers don't lie. Women are actively searching for content that shows the exact opposite of what they claim to want in the real world. And what does this tell us? It tells us there are two women. There is the public woman, the social woman, the one who speaks at the office, the one who posts on Instagram, the one who proclaims her feminist values. And then there is the private woman, the erotic woman, the one who emerges when she is alone, when the lights are off, when no one can judge her. And those two women want radically different things. The public woman wants respect, equality, and to be treated as a partner. The private woman wants to be dominated, possessed, and taken by a man who doesn't ask for permission. Here is the secret that changes everything. The private woman is the real one. The public woman is the mask. It's the performance she must maintain to function in society, to protect her reputation, to avoid being judged. But when you are with her in private, when you are in the bedroom, when you are in that intimate space where social masks can finally fall away, she doesn't want you to deal with the public woman. She wants you to speak to the private woman. And the private woman speaks a completely different language, a language of domination, of power, of uncivilized masculinity. Let me give you an archetype every woman knows, one that every woman has fantasized about in some form: Beauty and the Beast, that fairy tale they are read since childhood. And what is that story really about? A young, beautiful woman is captured by a monster, a terrifying, violent, dangerous being. And what does she do? She falls in love with him, not despite the fact that he is a monster, but precisely because he is a monster, because he represents raw power, undomesticated masculinity, and danger. Here is the crucial part of the story that everyone misses. The beast does not become human because he became softer, kinder, or more civilized. He becomes human because she loved him as a monster first. She saw the ferocity, the darkness, the danger, and that is what attracted her. Only after that, only once he had possessed her emotionally, does he transform. But notice the order. First the monster, then the transformation, not the other way around. This is exactly the pattern women repeat again and again in real life. They fall for the bad boy, for the dangerous man, for the one everyone warns them about, for the one covered in red flags. Why? Because he represents the beast. He represents uncivilized masculinity. He represents danger. And something in her biology, something deeper than any social conditioning, responds to that. She gets aroused by it. She fantasizes about taming him, about being the only one who can turn the beast into a prince. But here is the tragedy. Here is the cycle that destroys relationships over and over again. Once she successfully tames the bad boy, once she turns him into the stable boyfriend, the reliable husband, the responsible father, something inside her shuts down. She loses interest, she loses attraction, because he is no longer the beast. He is no longer dangerous. He no longer activates that primitive part of her brain that responds to dominant masculinity. He becomes just another safe, predictable, boring man, and she begins to look for her next beast to tame. Machiavelli understood this cycle perfectly when he wrote about how people, once they get what they wanted, immediately want something else. Human nature is never satisfied with what it has. It always desires what comes next. And women demonstrate this constantly in their relationships. The man who was exciting when he was unreachable becomes boring once he is captured. The mystery that was so attractive becomes frustrating once it is revealed. The challenge that was so seductive becomes irritating once it is conquered. So what do you do with this information? How do you use this understanding without becoming a real monster, without crossing lines that should never be crossed?
Because here is the delicate balance. Women want the beast, but they don't want to be truly harmed. They want the simulation of danger, not real danger. They want to feel like they are with a man who could be dangerous, but who chooses not to be dangerous with her. A man who has the capacity for violence, for domination, for ferocity, but who channels it in ways that excite her without actually hurting her. This requires a level of emotional intelligence most men don't have. It requires reading subtle signals. It requires understanding where the line is between erotic domination and real abuse. It requires accessing your own primitive masculinity without letting it control you. Because if you simply act like a violent idiot, if you confuse being dominant with being abusive, you will only scare her and push her away. But if you are too soft, too respectful, too civilized, you will never activate that dark part of her that truly wants to surrender to you. The man who masters this, the man who understands how to navigate that space between safety and danger, between respect and domination, between civilization and savagery, that man gains access to levels of female devotion that nice guys will never experience, because he is speaking the language the private woman understands. He is activating parts of her psychology she cannot explain rationally, but that respond viscerally. Now, let me give you concrete examples. How does this show up in the bedroom? The difference between a man who understands this and one who doesn't is the difference between a woman who fakes orgasms just to get it over with and a woman who becomes sexually addicted to you. The man who doesn't understand follows what women's magazines taught him. He asks for permission constantly. He is gentle. He is respectful. He tries to please her, and she appreciates him. She finds him sweet, but it doesn't arouse her. She doesn't fantasize about it afterward. She doesn't crave it. The man who understands does something different. He reads her body signals, not her words. Because her words will say, "Be gentle," but her body will respond when you are firm. Her words will say, "Ask me first," but her body will melt when you simply take what you want. Her words will say, "Respect me," but her psychology will activate when you dominate her in ways she can rationalize as acceptable because it happened in the heat of the moment, because it was so intense she couldn't resist. And here it is. Machiavelli's third lesson applies perfectly here. He observed that people are quicker to forget the death of their father than the loss of their property. Adapted to our context, women remember how you made them feel, not what you said. A man can say all the right words, do all the right things according to the feminist handbook, but if he doesn't make her feel that primitive intensity, that surrender, that delicious fear mixed with desire, he will be forgotten. But the man who made her feel possessed, dominated, sexually consumed, even if he technically did things she would publicly say she doesn't like, that man lives in her memory forever. That is the man for whom she will break her own rules again and again. And this leads us to something even darker, something that will truly make people uncomfortable. Women have fantasies of non-consent. I am not talking about real rape. I am talking about fantasies of being taken by a man so dominant, so overwhelmingly masculine, that she cannot resist, that her resistance melts away, that she says no, but her body says yes. And before the cancellation mobs arrive, before the digital pitchforks come out, this is not my opinion. This is documented science.
Academic studies have confirmed again and again that one of the most common sexual fantasies among women involves non-consent scenarios. Why? Why would a woman fantasize about something that in the real world would be traumatic? Because in fantasy, she controls everything. In fantasy, the man who takes her is exactly the man she would choose. It's attractive, it's powerful. He is the man of her dreams, simply so dominant that she doesn't have to carry the responsibility of saying yes. She can surrender completely without guilt, because technically she didn't choose. He was simply so overwhelming that she couldn't resist. It's a psychological fiction that allows her to explore submission without the guilt society would place on her for admitting she wants to be dominated. And the man who understands this, who understands that there is a massive difference between fantasy and reality, but also knows how to recreate the feeling of that fantasy in a safe and consensual context, that man unlocks something in the female psyche that is almost addictive, because he gives her permission to explore that dark part of herself. He gives her a space where she can be the private woman, shameless and unjudged.
Now, let's talk about something most men completely misunderstand. They believe that if they are physically attractive, muscular, handsome, they will automatically succeed with women. And that is partially true. Appearance matters, but not in the way you think. Women don't get aroused by a pretty face. They get aroused by what that face signals: your genetics, your testosterone, your capacity for protection and resources. But here is the secret that unattractive men need to hear. You can be physically unattractive and still activate those same circuits. You can be short, bald, with uneven features, but if you project authentic masculinity, if you demonstrate controlled ferocity, if you move through the world as if you don't apologize for taking up space, women will respond. Not all women, but the ones who have access to their private woman, the ones who are not completely conditioned by social validation, the ones who trust their own instincts, those women will see something in you that the handsome but domesticated man does not have. Because there are two types of attraction. There is display attraction, the kind women show off to their friends, and there is visceral attraction, the kind that truly excites them in private. The man with display attraction is tall, good-looking, has a good job, and knows how to behave in society. He is the prize that looks good on Instagram. But the man with visceral attraction is the one who activates something primitive in her, the one who isn't necessarily conventionally attractive, but who has a presence, an energy, a masculinity she can't explain rationally, yet her body responds to it. And the brutal irony is this: many women will end up with the first man publicly while fantasizing about the second privately. They will marry the safe man while remembering the dangerous one, because society rewards one choice and her biology craves the other, and they live in that cognitive dissonance constantly. The final lesson from Machiavelli that you need to understand is this. He warned that a prince must learn how not to be virtuous when the situation requires it. He was not saying, be evil. He was saying, do not let abstract ideas of morality prevent you from doing what is necessary. Applied to sexual dynamics, this means do not let what women say they want stop you from giving them what they actually need. If she says she wants a man who shares his emotions, but she gets aroused when you are stoic, be stoic. If she says she hates games, but responds when you are unpredictable, be unpredictable. If she says she values equality, but melts when you dominate her, dominate her. I am not saying ignore her consent. I am not saying hurt her. I am saying learn to distinguish between what her conscious mind says and what her body responds to, because many times they are in direct contradiction, and the man who only listens to words while ignoring bodily signals will end up as a frustrated nice guy who does everything right but never gets the results he wants. Women are dirty. Their minds have dark corners filled with fantasies they will never admit in public, desires that completely contradict their social image, longings that shame them even as they excite them. And the man who can see that without judging it, who can understand it without exploiting it cruelly, who can navigate that space with intelligence and control, that man gains access to a depth of intimacy and devotion that most will never know. Because finally, she has found someone with whom she can be completely real, completely herself. No social mask, no feminist performance, just her primitive, dark sexual self without apologies. And that freedom, that acceptance of all parts of her, including the parts society says she shouldn't have, is more valuable than any compliment, any gift, any romantic gesture you could offer. So, if you've made it this far, if these truths resonated with something you already suspected but couldn't put to words, it's time to act. Like this video right now, not tomorrow, now. Because that simple act reminds you that you are committed to seeing reality as it is, not as you were told it should be. Share this with another man who needs to understand that what women say and what women want are two completely different things. Subscribe because we're going much deeper than this. There are levels of female psychology I haven't even touched yet. Secrets that once you understand them will completely change the way you navigate the world of sex and relationships. But I can only share them with men bold enough to face uncomfortable truths. Prove that you are one of them. Act now.